everybody, it's Tom Christie back in the painting studio, and this will be session 2 of creating a miniature red-breasted nuthatch, and I'm making this as a Christmas ornament, so not a ton of detail. In the previous session we got the bird carved, in case you want to check that out. In this session we'll get the bird painted. I'm going to use this reference photo along with a few others from the bird feeder. And let's bring the camera in, talk about some of the color patterns on this beautiful bird. If you're enjoying my channel, please hit the subscribe button. I would appreciate it. It's totally free, but it's a show of support for this channel that I continue to build with resources for people that might want to carve wildfowl. This is a little bit of a departure for me, but I'm normally in waterfowl. But songbirds are fun too, and I'm really enjoying learning more about this bird. Before we start painting, I wanted to take a quick look at the reference photo that was kind of the inspiration for this carving. This was off of my bird feeder, and this particular red-breasted nuthatch had a sunflower seed in its beak, and that became the inspiration for this little Christmas ornament miniature. In looking at the reference, there's a lot of variation in this area back here. I'm seeing some birds with the black extending on down. I'm seeing some birds with less white in here, more white, clear down to here. I'm going to use this reference photo for my inspiration for the painting process. So we'll do this dark stripe, dark cap, white eye stripe above, and a little bit of a patch of white here and on the cheek, and then this peach rusty color coming up almost to the beak, but it looks like it's white under here, so we'll fade that out. Kind of this slate blue gray color, and then definitely the primaries and tertials get a little darker, some burnt umber values, and there's also this little group of feathers, and I noticed in a lot of my reference photos this little white feather down here under the almost black feather. So we'll try to portray that in this carving. I've got the main areas sketched in. Looks like that black cap comes about to here. So let's get started on the colors. For this slate kind of blue-gray, I started with Payne's gray, added some Nimbus gray to that to lighten it up, added some raw umber to warm it up, and then added a little bit of carbon black just to drive it more to gray and less blue. And I'm going to paint that on the back, right up to the cap here. And right now I'm going to go ahead and paint the primaries and the tail that color. Pretty dark gray, but some hints of blue in the mix. So I'll get that put on these areas. I'm going to use off-white to paint the stripe in here. Off-white, I've mixed up white gesso with just a little bit of raw umber to knock down the brightness a bit. And I'm using a little scrubber just to keep this soft. And it'll take a couple of coats. And that actually just fades into the blue-gray cape here, so we're going to want to work on a blend in that area. I'm just starting with a a little bit of a scrub across that area. And these stripes don't meet in back according to my reference. The black cap comes back, meets the cape between the stripes. Right over the eye. This is another area that I see a lot of variation. Some birds, the white goes all the way to the beak. In some very clear reference photos I have, the black stripe comes in and actually wraps around under the white against the beak. So that's what I'm going to do on this bird. It's probably different ages of birds in the variation. But I'm going to go with the pictures that I have with the local birds here. I'm also going to paint the cheek white right up to the beak and under the eye. And again, I'm using this scrubber just to lightly get a start on these colors. And this will take a couple of coats, at least probably 3 or 4. And then this white does extend up to the lower mandible. There's kind of a cheek here, and then it starts to blend in with this rusty color that we'll put down below. So I'm keeping the edges very soft so we don't have any hard paint edges to try to disguise later. Okay, I'll work on that, build up the color, and come back. Now I'm using carbon black on a little scrubber again, going right into the eye. Trying to scrub a soft line between the white and the black here. This kind of comes up and then dives back down. And then it's going to fade into the gray back here. Put a little blend there. And the reference that I have a little bit of a hook there and just some indications of feathers blending into the white there. Fading that into the gray. Same with the cap. I'm going to try to create a soft line between the white and the black here by scrubbing back and forth. And we'll come back and put some details in there to further convey that. And then this fades out into the black or the gray back here. Again, the reference that I am looking at has a little bit of the white continuing above the beak. So I'll go ahead and get those put in, and then I'm going to take this black and just a very narrow band right above the beak here in front. You can look at your own reference there. As I mentioned, there's a lot of variation. I'm just going to go with the pictures that I have. And I'm not in screen there, but like that. I'm painting the upper and lower mandible of the beak carbon black right now. Come back and put some highlights on it later. Got a little detail brush. Trying to keep the natural finish on that sunflower seed. So I'm just carefully painting around, including in between the mandibles. So I'll get the lower mandible painted the same way, using a little black, carbon black, and a detail brush to go ahead and put some feather barbs into the gray. And I'm going to do the same thing kind of down in this direction. Same thing in the white stripes. Just going to put a few feather barbs in there. Across the junction here, and the same thing going up in this direction. So we just want to make this look more like feathers. Pretty meticulous at this scale, but I'll work all of those black and white areas like that. For this rusty yellow orange, I'm using gold oxide, yellow oxide, white, and a little bit of burnt umber. And for this throat area, I'm using a little more yellow oxide with white to kind of transition from that rusty color to a lighter yellow, pale yellow. And then I've got a little filbert, and I'm going to work to get a blend across that area. Fade out into the darker color. Just using some of the off-white in a detail brush, pulling in a few feather barbs, break this up a bit. Same here. Put a few in here, a few up here, just to blend that into the cape area. That lower mandible is very light and then darkens at the tip, so we want to do that. So I'm going to use a little smoked pearl and a little scrub brush and gradually lighten this and let it fade to dark on the tip. Like that. Then I'm using a little off-white, same brush, and lightening that even further close to the chin here, letting that fade out into the darker value. It almost matches the color of the feathering in that area. Then kind of the same process on the upper mandible to lighten it near the face and not quite as light, it looks like, down as the lower mandible. So I'm back to the smoked pearl. Gonna lighten the lower edge by scrubbing and then let that fade out to the darker value. About like that. All right, I've mixed a little lighter value of this color by adding more white and a little more yellow oxide to it. And I want to go through the throat and belly area and just put some feather flow indications. Very thin, kind of interlocking. And these begin to sweep up towards the back here. Just to break this up, make it look more like feathers. I'm going to pull a few of those into the gray up there. So I'll do the entire belly like this, back to the rump. In the throat area, I'm using off-white to do the same type of thing and pull some flow lines into the neck. We don't need much up here. About like that. Now for the primaries, I've added burnt umber to this base color mix to darken it and make it more brown. And I'm going to paint the primaries with that mixture. Now I'm going to use Nimbus Gray to outline the primaries. As they tuck down into the body here. Pretty delicate work here. Now I want to darken these tertials a bit. I'll probably leave the ones on top this bluish color, but these I'm going to add some burnt umber too. I'm using the primary mix, that darker version of this, and a little scrubber, and going in and darkening some of these as they go down, particularly as they get closer to the back, closer to the primaries. I think I will darken these just a bit in the middle. Just scrubbing a soft, darker value on there. And that'll take a little time to go back and forth and soften that up and get rid of any mistakes. I'm going to come back with the lighter bluish color and blend over those so that we get a nice soft appearance. I'm going to leave these the color they are. Now I've got a little Nimbus Gray darkened very slightly with the body base color, and I'm just going into the edges of these tertials with my detail brush and lightening the edge of each one. So I'm going to use a little more Nimbus Gray near the back to lighten those up. Kind of fading them out as they get up to the front there. Then I've got off-white in the brush, and I'm lightening the tips of these and letting that fade out into the Nimbus gray edge. I'm going to use the Nimbus gray again and just put a faint highlight on these and fade that out. As it goes into the cape here. Got a little too much water in the brush. That's better. Then I'm going to put a little bit of a feather quill in these big feathers. Also put a quill in the primaries here with the Nimbus gray. Or try to. This little group of 3 feathers is dark, so I've added some carbon black just slightly to this mix we put together for the primaries. And I'm going to paint those in on both sides. And then we'll add the feather details. They lay in here. This is that dark group of small feathers here, so we'll paint that in. And also then this feather looks jet black in this picture, similar to the eye stripe. And there's also a light lower feather here. So I'll paint those in as well. Just using carbon black here. Just kind of tucking that underneath. Now we can do the feather edging. I'm going to use Nimbus gray. A little more water. Do the same thing here. This one I'm going to add that with the off-white. So that it's visible. On the lower edge of the wing there. Taking a little Payne's gray and just pulling some feather flow lines through this area. Just to indicate feathers there on the cape. I'll do the same thing in between the primaries here. Just to add a little feather indication. This Payne's gray has a bluish tint to it. The tail feathers have a little black feather near the outer edges, and then a white feather next to that. And then the central part of the tail is kind of large bluish base body color feathers. So I'm just creating a blend with a little scrubber of this carbon black towards the center of the tail, but we want to leave the center of the tail the bluish color. This is a reference shot. You can see there's a couple of large feathers here in the center to maintain this color. Clear back to the tip of the tail, and then this black, and then the very edge is the off-white. Now I'm just going to scrub in the off-white and just kind of fade that into the rump area and do a little bit of a blend into the black. So I'll work on that to get it nice and soft and build up the color a bit. I'm just using Nimbus Gray to then pull some feathers through here. Just add a feather quilt to this big feather with Nimbus Gray. Okay. I did tone these down a little bit. It looks like they're brighter out at the tip, and then they kind of fade out as they go into the body. Use a little Nimbus gray there to tone those down. Underneath the tail, I'm not going to worry about too much detail here. I'm just going to use Nimbus gray and put some layered feather edges in here. Call it good. I used my detail brush and used a little darker value of the base body color by adding some carbon black to it and pulled in these feather splits. Final touch, I've got a little white gesso, and I'm just going to go through and put in a few ticks through the off-white area here to add some feathering and a little bit of flow to the white areas. Pretty subtle. I don't even know if you can see it in the video, but it just adds a little detail to make that area more realistic and more interesting. Pulling that right up into these markings in the black. I'm going to do the same thing through this eye stripe. Just go in and add a little bit of bright white. All right, I've got the bird sealed up with a couple of coats of Krylon matte finish. I put a little gloss on the beak with Deft Semi-Gloss, or Prolux as it's called now. Put the hanger back on. He's going to look nice on the tree. Fun project. All right, everybody, that's a wrap on the red-breasted nuthatch. And like I said, I had fun making the bird. There he is on kind of a Christmas tree. It's a little early yet, but it'll be fun to see him hanging there. Until next time, Tom Christie signing out. I hope some of what I've demonstrated here in the carving and the painting of this bird will be helpful to you, especially to newer carvers out there. It's a great place to start on something small, relatively simple. So give it a shot. Talk to you later.